or how she was handbacked with 60 books in isolation, and this was not an easy read because due to the subject matter and also the narrative voice. It's called Franci's War. It's by Franci Epstein, and I will read the blurb. It's the story of a woman in Czechoslovakia during the Holocaust. Here we go. Right. In the summer of 1942, 22-year-old Franci Rubinek, designated a Jew by the Nazi racial laws, arrived at Terezin, a concentration camp, a former ghetto 40 miles north of her home in Prague. It would be the beginning of her 3-year journey from Terezin to the Czech family camp in Auschwitz-Birkenau, to the slave labour camps in Hamburg, and finally Belgium-Belsen. Franci, a spirited and glamorous young woman, was known amongst her fellow inmates as the Prague dress designer. Having enjoyed the transportation of her parents, she never forgot her mother's parting words. The only duty to us is to stay alive. During an Auschwitz selection, Franci was spontaneously lied to Nazi officer Dr. Joseph Mengele and came to be an electrician. A split-second decision that would go on to endanger and save her life. Yeah. Now, it's very interesting as well because normally books about the Holocaust are written by men. So it's very, very rare. Primo Levi, for example, it's very, very rare in a way, okay, to find a female narrative voice. It is a diary of Anne Frank, of course. I mean, that's one of the most strongest novels about the Holocaust. But the thing is, Anne's journey, her sadly tragic life, along with her family, apart from Otto Frank, was about isolation. They're trying to survive a war by staying alive and hiding. It's also tragic book too. This is a story, okay, of a spirited young woman who was not raised within the Jewish faith. She was only a child who was designated a Jew and endured hellish conditions. And she goes from, at the start, Franci is obviously, she's not quite wealthy, she's very, very spirited, very, very independent. And war is creeping in, and she's also quite ignorant of the realities of what's going on. Okay, this is chapter 4, so here we go. In 1949, my parents and I were arrested by the Gestapo because for my boyfriend's mother's jewellery. My boyfriend was Peptic Joe Scola. His mother had staged some of her jewellery with a maid Z, who had been Joe's commander in the Czechoslovakian army. Because they're looking for Joe, they arrested us. That was my first contact with the Gestapo. They arrested my parents first without telling them the charges, and a few hours later, when I returned home from an errand, they interrogated us separately for 12 hours, with my parents totally unaware of what this was all about. But it would happen later in the war. I was not mistreated during these long hours. I was even offered chocolate and cigarettes, alternated with threats of shooting me and my parents if I didn't talk. Yeah, 1939 was crept in. Now I've been to Prague twice. I've been to Terezin too. If I could dig them out, I'm going to put the pictures of Terezin at the end of this, so you can see for yourself. And what it was like. Now, as I said before, she was not raised within the Jewish faith, so she is quite ignorant, okay, of her own history and her heritage. But they always designated her a Jew, so she's kind of thrust into this very, very unfamiliar situation. And Joe, who then her boyfriend, eventually becomes her husband, the war's creeping into such a way that all liberties are being taken away. They have to wear the yellow star. They issue with the jobs. Her mother's family firm, which is a tailor, a dressmaker, is kind of passed on to a colleague, okay? An employee who changes the name, gets the D, and oh, it's hers now. Okay, all the liberties are being taken away. And very, very tragic moments in it too. Now, one thing about Franci's memoir, because this is her memoir, is she's very, very to the point. In a way, okay, she lacks sentimentality. Like this bit here. This bit here. It's after she's married Joe and she's falls pregnant. My father held forth about the irresponsibility of having a child at a time like this and demanded that I have an immediate abortion. I was in total agreement with him. I don't want a baby. I was 20 years old, saddled with responsibility for 4 people. I want to amuse myself as much as possible within the constraints of a severely limited way of life. Besides, I was more such a playmate that the idea of him becoming a father made me laugh. So she had an illegal abortion, which obviously is tragic, but the thing is, so if they give birth to the baby, and then you wind up in a well, hindsight, that's the thing, hindsight. Because mothers and babies, mothers with children, okay, they were taken off that transport and immediately sent One Direction, that One Direction led to, we all know. So, and the thing is, it is a thing where Franci is really kind of trying to take responsibility of her own life as well. Is that there's one bit here is when her father, okay, after the Nazis come, ready to take him to the camps, he's ready to take his life, but Franci does something as well. Now, I like the fact that she's willing to talk about this as well, because this obviously this is a memoir. It's not an easy thing to talk about. Okay, right. In a burst of defiance, my father told us he would not wait for the Nazis to murder him and my mother. Patting his breast pocket with a strange expression in his face, he could find out that he means to take care of both of them before things got too difficult. A vial of poison. Should not have spoken, but I did. I confessed that we had been arrested in Prague by the Gestapo. I found the vial on his desk. Suspicious about his contents, I had taken them to a pharmacy to be analysed, and discovered that what the pills were had then replaced them with saccharin. Then for the last time, I watched my father fly into one of his familiar rages, shouting that a brat like me had no right to interfere in his affairs. So, and her parents actually did wind up in a gas chamber, which they were taken and they were pretty much taken straight away. She never saw her family again. And I will respect Franci for telling us that story. Is the fact is that she did it in a way because she was an only child. She wanted to be alone. She actually begged to be on the transport with her parents because she didn't want to be alone. There was a sense of, and I'm not sure if this is with only children because I'm not an only child, but I feel being alone, being abandoned. And that was her biggest fear. And then she lost everyone. And then she lost Joe. And then you can kind of see this woman maturing as well. You can see this individual kind of not blossoming, but becoming a different person, more independent, wanting to do more. It's kind of, maturity in the most tragic of circumstances, because as I said before in previous videos, Auschwitz was hell incarnate. As a friend of mine who is of the Jewish faith once pointed out to me, as the Jews don't have hell, the Nazis gave it to them. That's what he said to me. So after terrorism, and terrorism is interesting as well, because her depiction of terrorism is, at various points of terrorism, the Nazis they made it appear nicer. They made it appear as it was a good place to be. They did shows and there was theatre productions and addresses, because the Red Cross and people used to come to terrorism to make sure the Jews are being, well, better kept, if you will. I'd use that word. So there was art and there was history and there was that kind of thing, and all the people who involved in that wound up in the gas chambers, wound up being killed. So it's interesting seeing terrorism, which is obviously kind of like the calm before the storm, and in a way, kind of a semblance of life. Okay, Nazis were kind of forced to make it look better. Okay, so they got comfortable there. They had families there, and then it was a stopgap towards this bit here. One word where it says, it's page 80. It was late the next night we stopped at a platform with a big sign that read Auschwitz. At this point the name did not have any meaning for me. I didn't realise we were in Poland because the other half of the sign read Auschwitz. She's in Auschwitz. And it's interesting because most other books or memoirs about Auschwitz go into a lot about the description. This in a way doesn't. It goes on, okay, we'll go what we see through Franci's head. Okay? And one thing I did also appreciate is the fact is that it's telling us more about stories about his individuals. She's with her friend Kitty quite a bit too. Okay, Kitty who also survived the war. And it's interesting because she has no issue with describing her fellow countrymen and what they did. Like this bit here. At dawn, a strange man spouted an armband with the initials CP, criminal police, appeared and started pacing down the long and brick horizontal chimney that ran the length of the barrack. He also do like the rest of us, but endowed with a high exaggerated sense of his own importance. Perfect caricature of an SS man, said that he was not trying to be funny, that he'd become just like his masters. So everything that they had with him had to be removed, okay? But the thing is, obviously, people were doing what they did there to survive, okay? People who had to work within the system, if you will. The Jews who had to actually work alongside the Nazis were doing it for their own survival. Okay, but from Franci's point of view, she's more like amusement. Okay, and there's a bit okay where she actually manages to call him the Crypto Clown. Okay, right. Actually, I'm frozen her wedding ring. Here you go. And this bit here, this is where to me the book shifts. This is page 88. Okay, now I mentioned before, okay, about the tattoos, the devil's arithmetic. Now, one thing I've never ever mentioned till now is this: in the Jewish faith, tattoos are persona non grata. Okay, they are then very very frowned upon. Okay, and so when Franci gets her a tattoo, okay, this bit here. I stared down at my tattooed arm, and like a badly focused picture in the camera, it so detached itself and became two arms. But only one had a tattoo. Tried to focus back, but that moment continued until there were two of us, me and A4116. I thought, what is she doing here, poor devil? I know her. I'm sorry for her. I'll watch her. She looks just like me. Now, throughout a main section of this book, Franci does not refer to herself as Franci. Suddenly, it's me. It's no longer I. It's A4116. Now, obviously, as a memoir, she's attaching herself from the situation. What happened to Franci and what happened to A4116? A4116 has happened to, but Franci, in a way, as a coping mechanism, Franci had to kind of split her identity in two, detach herself. Okay, this person to that person. So what happened to Franci happened to A4116, because it's horrifying. And what's interesting, okay, this bit here, okay, this is the bit where she gets one over on Joseph Mengele, okay. A4116 watched the proceedings with her detached interest, making a mental note of the fact that even young girls and strong girls with appendectomy scars running up on the wrong side. And by some strange coincidence, everyone had become a dressmaker, factory, or farm worker overnight, and that every last housewife had disappeared. And to reach the dashing doctor, he fired the questions at her. Number A4116, age 24, married, yes, children, yes, well. Profession, electrician. What, electrician, is that true? Yes. You know how to pull wires and such? Yes. To the right, and make a note of that you ought to describe. Okay? Her father was an electrician, that's how she knows about electric. So she gets through the war by becoming a camp electrician. She gets through it by becoming an electrician. And the detachment between A4116 and Franci is just so compelling. I mean, when I first read that, it threw me. But then I recognised what it is. What happened to Franci was so horrific in a way that she never really dealt with it. It's interesting because Franci, well, A4116 describes herself as going through these things, okay? But at the same time, in her head, it's like she's getting on with life. You don't really realise till later on how ill she is. She is ill. She is seriously ill. She's... The images of the camp that you see in images, they're her. But yet there's that detachment going on. But this bit here is when the British came. Right. The British were finally here. The Union Jack fluttered in the wind, but the emails were too far gone to take in the reality of Phil Joy. Hesitantly, still expecting to be shot, they ventured out of the huts one by one. As truth became clearer, they began to walk crawl and run to the fences to see the liberators are close by. One after another, the armoured vehicles came down the road, with the soldiers turning the pockets inside out and throwing the contents, chocolate bars, K-rations, cigarettes and other little things, over the fences and lifting their fingers in a V salutation. Many of them were crying. The things they threw immediately caused scores of bloody battles along the starved prisoners. Yeah. And of course, Franci being seriously ill, okay, not really recognising that she's seriously ill, because A4116 is happening to. It's only a page 28, okay, so to 28, page 174, here it comes, When I woke up later the same day, the sun was shining through the window, and the room seemed different than it had been before. Right. It was May the 8th, 1945. Very weak with a clear mind, I marvelled at the white sheets and clearness of the room I found myself in. I was only checked there. They were painted all Hungarian. Eyes back, Franci's back, the detachment. While she's in Auschwitz, okay? Because while she was in Terezin, she was still Franci. Once she's at Auschwitz with the tattoo, she's A4116. And now it's back. And the thing is, they're trying to reconcile what happened to you, what happened after the war. Having a kid to go back to Germany, okay? So, correct, no, don't. Go back to go back to Prague, okay? People don't understand. People are not ready to understand what happened in Auschwitz to the other camps, to the people, okay? Even people who lived close by to Auschwitz. Now, there's a documentary I'm going to talk about quickly that I saw. It's like a kind of show reel of what happened after the war. Basically, what the Allied nations did was that they got people from the local towns around the camps and took them into the camps to let them see what was really happening there. And look on their faces now. The vague actors, or they really didn't know what was going on in there. Ignorance was bliss. Okay, people just didn't know. And this bit here is when she goes to a dance. Okay, there's one occasion she's been taken care of. Okay, and by the what is the Red Cross. Okay, and they suspected that our attitude of soldiers who had not been part of the liberation of Belgium would be quite different towards us, and it would be difficult for them to comprehend the difference between a liberated Jewish prisoner and a German fallen. Oh, sorry, she went to Auschwitz to Belgium, then she was liberated, so I forgot to say that. I've actually been to Belgium, so we'll soon. That's quite true that I discovered a few nights earlier when I'd been dancing with a newly arrived major from Scotland. When I was doing the swing, he in his kilt and I dressed in the US Navy pants. He might have found it somewhat bizarre to have one's telephone number tattooed on one's arm. Angered by his stupidity, I left him standing on the dance floor, wondering what he had maybe behaved in such a rude way. Yeah, people just didn't understand. And the thing is, when she goes back to Prague, people don't understand there. And in some cases, there seems to be resentment at the fact that she survived. She's back. Yeah. I mean, she goes to her family home, and it's a bit Maxie. Here we go. Right. I dropped in at my former place of business. Marie welcomed me, the same embarrassed expression as Max, immediately pointing out that nothing of mine was on the premises anymore. She had put everything in storage towards the end of the war in the event of any accusations from Czech authorities that she had enriched herself with Jewish property. She also has intimated it clear that none of the old customers were coming to her and her husband, who was a tailor, anymore. They had refurnished the place in their own expense with the lease in her new name. It was all theirs. Right. I got the message loud and clear. Let her visit Max and his family. There I was served dinner on my own tablecloth. We drank out of my mother's glasses with that decisive indication on their part that could possibly seem strange for me. Right. I didn't have time, I did ask during the conversation what happened to Joe's clothes. Our husband actually passed away. I'd left with them. Didn't have much to wear for winter. I could alter some of his suits for me. They'll tell me about the terrible hard times they had all been through and the fact that a lot of our stuff had been bartered for food. When the older boy, now 18, came through the door dressed in Joe's suit. Elena blushed, and I quickly reassured her that it wasn't what mattered, as I understood, and the suit looked better on Daryl's skin than ever would on me. But I did not understand. However, a lot of her friends who did have their family possessions did give them back, and also with some money too. She wasn't just totally neglected, but it was the idea of people not understanding. People basically ripped them off, and they continued to rip them off. Now, in the book I mentioned previously, Auschwitz, that was also mentioned by other people who survived the camps. The fact is that when they went back to get their jewelry money back, a lot of times it wasn't given back to me, or they giving less back and said, well, this is what you left us, and they kept the rest because they were hoping that deep down they wouldn't survive the war, and they did. So in a way, okay, also Franci is now alone back in Prague. She's trying to crave a new identity, trying to figure out who she is. And Kitty, her friend, actually settles down and marries, but obviously Franci's kind of adrift, okay? And it also mentions as well mental health post-war. I think this is the first book I've ever read about the Holocaust, which talks about female mental health after the war. As I said before, the narrative voices of women aren't normally that focused upon. Okay, if we do get a memoir about the camp, okay, or fictionalized memoir about the camp, but actually written from a female survivor who went through such deplorable circumstances, of clearly her mental health issues with her detachment, okay, of the number on her arm and herself, and trying to find her new identity because she's lost everyone. Okay, she's an orphan, she's a widow, she's trying to find a new. And luckily, as this was actually co-written by Franci's family, she did forge a better life. So, as an exploration of the narrative voice of women during the Holocaust, I do recommend it. It takes a while to get used to the language, and during the acknowledgements and comments by her daughter, it mentions the fact that she had to change, do a bit of research on, because this all came from Francis' memory. And as a memorial and a memoir, it is worth read. And Francie, I'm so sorry what happened to you, and I'm so thank you for sharing your life. If a family ever read this or watch this. Anyway, 60 books in isolation. I'm signing off. Bye now.